A secret society's handbook was exposed by AI, and what it reveals is pretty fascinating. In today's video, you'll learn about the occultist conspiracy and how an AI program exposed a 300-year-old secret. So get ready as we dive into the mystery of the ancient occultists. Two men can keep a secret if one of them is dead. That saying is often used to highlight how easy it is for secrets to slip out into the open. But what if both men are dead, and their secret is written in code that no one can crack? Even then, the secret can come to light. And that's exactly what happened with the Copiale Cipher, a 300-year-old book that had puzzled historians and language experts for centuries. At some point, everyone gave up on the document and shelved it at the German Academy of Sciences, where it was first discovered. So much about the document was unknown, like who wrote it, how did it end up at the Academy, and most importantly, what was its purpose? The only thing that was confirmed about the Copiale Cipher was that it was handwritten at some point in the 1700s. A quick glance at the cipher might trick you into thinking that it was written in ancient Roman or Greek, but anyone who knows these languages will tell you that the cipher isn't written in either. It has Greek and Roman characters, but what they spell out are words that do not exist in any language. And that's precisely why most linguists gave up on cracking the Copiale code. It had been a mystery for 250 years, and historians assumed that it would remain so till the end of time. But then, everything changed when this man learned about the Copiale Cipher. His name is Kevin Knight. He knows less about ancient languages and history than most people who had tried cracking the cipher before him. Yet he did what none of them could. He uncovered the secrets of the Copiale Cipher by using artificial intelligence. With advanced pattern recognition, Knight's program could pick up information that human experts could not. Here's Knight describing the process and what he found.
We used some automatic methods to cluster the letters, so we looked at groups of letters that behave similarly. We also have programs that can identify the language behind the text, and it gave a slight preference for German. One thing we noticed was that the Roman letters in the text all seem to have a similar behavior to one another. The first hypothesis that we had was that's the real code. In the end, it turned out that those Roman letters were the spaces between the words.
Using a mix of computer programs and expert translators, Knight was able to finally read the Copiale Cipher, and what he found inside was even more interesting.
And the first two words that we could see here in the German were ceremony of initiation. So that was very exciting because we had no idea what the book was about until that point. And the next two words were secret section.
In other words, the Copiale Cipher was a secret document that described an initiation ceremony. And that's where things get interesting. Apparently, the ceremony was an entry point into a secret society called the High Enlightened Occultist Order. And the now deciphered Copiale Cipher revealed not just how new members were initiated into the order, but also what the order was about. The book was divided into 3 parts. The first one covered the initiation ritual and the first few degrees of progression in the society. The next one described 18th century Masonic rituals. And the final part got into newer secret societies and occult rituals that were becoming popular in Germany. The document seems to be a guide for recruiters of the occultist society, and its most interesting aspect is the initiation ritual of the order. Here's how it goes. First, the candidate takes a pledge of secrecy and loyalty to the society. Then, he is carried to a table that has a bunch of pre-arranged materials, including candles, spectacles, and a glass of water. But the most important thing on that table is a piece of paper with nothing written on it. The candidate is asked to look at the blank page for a while, and if he says that he sees nothing, the master gives him a pair of spectacles and asks him to see if he can read the writing. If the candidate still says that he sees nothing, then the master tells him not to worry and that his eyes will be opened and he will see the truth. Then, after getting his hopes up, he washes his eyes and wipes them with the cloth that's already there on the table. If the candidate still insists that he sees nothing, the master announces that it's time to conduct the operation. And the operation really is the most interesting part. Here's how it goes. The members that are there pick up the candles and surround the candidate, who is now placed on a different table. The master then uses a small pair of tweezers to pluck one hair from the candidate's eyebrow. Then he announces that the operation is over. Then the candidate is led back to the previous table, where he looks at the paper and can now see that it is full of secret knowledge. But how? Well, that too is described in the Copiale Cipher. The book says that while the candidate is busy getting his quote-unquote operation done, the blank paper is swapped with another document called The Entire Teaching for the Apprentices. So when he comes back, he's not looking at the same paper, it's a different paper. And what's on it is the knowledge that the occultists are hiding. Unfortunately, this Teaching for Apprentices document was never discovered, so we don't know what knowledge these guys were passing on to their new candidates. All we know is how they turned potential candidates into members. What I find interesting about the ritual is that it seems like a test of truthfulness. Candidates were initially told that there were words on a blank page, and that only a select few could see. If the candidate tried to act like he could see the words, then the occultists knew that he was dishonest and not the right person to join the order. However, if he was truthful and admitted that he couldn't see anything, the occultists would take him in after performing the mock surgery. As a member of the order, he would have access to hidden knowledge, and a part of that hidden knowledge was a way to signal your membership status to other occultists. So these secret signals could be performed in public and would go unnoticed by most people, but other occultists would see them and immediately understand that the person giving the signal belonged to their society. Here's one of the signals: taking tobacco with the thumb and the middle finger of the left hand. If someone did that in public back in 1700s Germany, they were signaling that they were a member of the occultist order. And if you were a member and saw someone do that, you would need to touch your left eye with your left hand as a way of saying, "Message received." Now both of you would know that you're part of the occultist society. What this tells me is that this secret society was large enough that not everyone knew each other. Otherwise, they wouldn't need signals. They'd just know who else was a member. But the occultist society had a whole system of signals, not just to reveal their membership status, but also their position in the order. There was a way to indicate an apprentice, the master, and so on. What's interesting is that the occultists weren't the only society that had secret signals meant to be used in public. The Illuminati, the Freemasons, and even the Golden Dawn have their own systems of secretly signaling membership in public. It's a signal that you and I would not be able to pick up, but other members would get it. For a long time, this was just a rumor, but old Masonic documents, as well as the Copiale Cipher, basically proved that secret signals are indeed a thing in such societies. And that is what makes photos like this quite concerning. Now, I'm not saying that any of these people are occultists. In fact, the Copiale Cipher doesn't mention this specific hand signal. In fact, there's a lot it doesn't mention. Like, what is the hidden knowledge of the occultists? What are the teachings given to the apprentice after the initiation ceremony? And most importantly, What happened to the occultist society? All these unanswered questions fuel the fires of speculation. So, let's dive into the key theories around the ancient order of the occultists. One theory regarding the occultists is that they are secretly controlling the government. And by government, I don't mean the government of Germany, where the order was originally established. I'm talking about the American government. One of the strongest pieces of evidence that connects the American establishment to the occultists is the symbol of the eye. The occultists literally named themselves after eye doctors. Their initiation ceremony was an eye surgery, and their entire identity revolved around the ability to see the truth. As for the American establishment, the eye is one of the oldest symbols. It can be found on the back of the $1 bill. The eye isn't just a design choice for the dollar bill. It is literally a part of the Great Seal of the United States. The front side of the seal makes sense, as it has a distinct American identity, but the back side seems to have a very esoteric design. The parallel of the eye is obvious, but its implications are unknown. The Great Seal was designed around the same time that the Copiale Cipher was written. If the occultists had enough influence back then, and influence only grows with time, imagine how much power they have today. They might control not just the US, but also the countries that are allied with it. And the terrifying part is that we do not know their end goal. One possible aim of the occultists could be to control everything we see. That could explain the push towards virtual reality. Companies are pouring billions into VR headsets and virtual universes. And if plugging into virtual reality becomes the default way of experiencing life, then whoever controls the tech will control the world. Some people believe that the guys behind this move are the occultists. Another interpretation is that the occultists aren't as concerned with our eyes as they are with their own. They've been obsessed with seeing the truth, and that might mean looking through the walls, seeing everything. In other words, they've been building a massive surveillance system. They see everything thanks to all the cameras that we willingly carry with ourselves. If the occultists want to have eyes everywhere, the internet is their perfect weapon. And if you go far back into its origins, you might even find evidence of occultists' involvement. See, the internet was created by DARPA, a US military research agency. The same agency also set up a surveillance wing called the Information Awareness Office, or IAO. Here's IAO's logo. See something familiar? That's the all-seeing eye, literally keeping an eye on the world. Given how much eye-related symbolism there is in the foundations of the US and the cipher of the occultists, it's easy to associate the two. But there's a theory that asserts the opposite, that the occultists were the enemies of the US, and that they were aligned with the Nazis. According to this theory, the occultists were still around when the Nazis got into power prior to the Second World War. And when you consider Hitler's obsession with the occult and his wonder weapons program, you get the terrifying portrait of an alliance that could have ruled the world. Hitler had reportedly commissioned a time-traveling device with anti-gravity capabilities. He was also closely aligned with Maria Orsic, a psychic who claimed to be in contact with aliens from a different galaxy. She had her own secret society that top Nazi generals were a part of, and their goal was to leave Earth and go to a different planet. Orsic's story caught fire because after preparing to leave Earth, she did in fact vanish, never to be seen again. I made an entire video about Hitler's psychic whisperer. But the part that's relevant is that he was into the occult, and secret societies were pretty prominent in Germany, even before the Second World War. In fact, the Illuminati started off as the Bavarian Illuminati, giving its name from Bavaria, which is in, you guessed it, Germany. The occultists, on the other hand, started off in Berlin, also in Germany. Both societies revolved around secret knowledge that most people were supposedly blind to. Given how long these societies have been around, it is possible that they were active in the early 1940s when Hitler was at the height of his power. Whether the occultists worked with or against Nazis is unclear. But what is clear is that they possessed hidden knowledge that powerful people were after. That's true not just of the occultists, but also of Freemasons and other secret societies, which brings us to the last theory we're going to look into. Because this one is a religion that is created on hidden knowledge. This theory posits that the world we live in is an illusion, and that we are being tricked by our senses into believing that it is real. Ideas like this go all the way back to the philosopher Plato, who saw this world as a cave filled with shadows. Most people, he believed, had only seen shadows their whole lives, so to them, shadows were reality. But reality was outside the cave, and most people would never access it because they'd spend their entire lives inside the cave surrounded by illusions. This allegory is what inspired the Matrix movies, where people are plugged into an artificial simulation that they believe is real. But that's not just a movie. For Gnostics, that was their religious belief, that a minor god tried to create his own reality to rule over. They call this false god the demiurge. So the demiurge tried to create his own world, but couldn't make it perfect. Instead, he made a world full of suffering. If you look at Mother Nature, all animals seem to suffer at some point, and humans were no different until the goddess of wisdom intervened and instilled in them the spirit of the true gods. And because of that, humans have a higher nature that is at odds with their animal side. And Gnostics believed that overcoming that animal side was the first step in transcending this reality and escaping the false world of the demiurge. So, according to their religion, there is a world outside of this reality, and they are the only ones with the keys to access it, the only ones who have that secret knowledge called Nasus. It seems like the occultists held the same beliefs and the same secrets. The Copiale Cipher mentions the teaching for the apprentices, which new members would see after the eye surgery. That document was never found, so whatever that hidden knowledge is, we don't have access to it. At best, we can speculate. On one side is the idea that the secret knowledge is simply religious in nature, and that exiting this false world is just a metaphor for going to heaven. On the other side is the idea that Nasus can be used to literally get out of this reality, perhaps to another dimension. Proponents of this idea argue that if Nasus was just a way to go to heaven in the afterlife, then occultists wouldn't need to hide it. There are so many religions in the world, and most have some type of afterlife. What makes Gnosticism different is that it is not centered around worship, and instead revolves around knowledge. But if we're talking about knowledge, then we might as well look at some of the criticism against the theories we've just discussed. And the first one is the shadow government theory. The main criticism against it is that there is really no need for a shadow government. Politicians are bought and sold out in the open, thanks to lobbying and campaign donations. The master manipulators are hidden in plain sight, and their main tool and main goal is money. The occultists do not seem money-obsessed, like the guys who buy influence in modern politicians. But what about the Eye of Providence? Isn't that a symbol of the occultists? Well, it is a symbol of many organizations and religious factions, including the occultists, Freemasons, and the Bavarian Illuminati. Thousands of years before them, the cult of Horus in ancient Egypt worshipped the all-seeing eye. So many spiritual factions, secret societies, and people in general have admired and venerated this symbol for so long that it cannot be pinned on any specific organization. And if we are to pick an organization to associate the eye with, it would be the Illuminati or the Freemasons. These organizations have a far bigger footprint than the occultists. My personal theory is that someone on the design committee of the Great Seal was a Freemason, and he used his position to sneak his sacred symbol into the Great Seal of a very young United States. Remember, the US was founded in the 1700s, and it was an experiment in freedom and self-governance. It had no ethnic identity, as it was differentiating itself from the British Empire. During this time, the US looked at other great civilizations and empires and borrowed elements to create its identity. The Roman Empire's influence on the US is evident to this day. So, using ancient Egyptian symbols like a pyramid and the all-seeing eye wasn't out of character for the country that was inspired by the great civilizations of the past. The important thing is that hundreds of years have passed since, and America has changed a lot. The possibility that a Freemason got on the design committee that created the Great Seal doesn't mean that the US is now puppeteered by Freemasons. Or maybe the design choice was inspired by ancient Egypt. But that doesn't mean that the cult of Horus is controlling the United States. Using a symbol from the time of George Washington to make a symbol about America today is a bit of a reach. But I'll concede that the Freemasons or even the occultists could have influenced our government at some point in history. And speaking of history, there's the theory that Nazis and the occultists work together. The main criticism against that is that the occultists associated themselves with Freemasons, and Nazis were very openly against Masons. They viewed Freemasons as a malicious cabal that was hatching conspiracies against the Reich. Their propaganda posters associated Jewish people with Freemasons in an attempt to push conspiracies of control. So, while the Nazis might have researched and even leveraged the paranormal, they weren't big fans of the Masons, who the occultists aligned themselves with. Finally, there's the Gnostic Truth theory, which claims that the occultists have access to hidden knowledge that lets them exit or control our reality. And there's no real way to debunk it, because we don't have access to the Teaching for the Apprentices document mentioned in the Copiale Cipher. We only know that it was shown to new members after they went through the ritual described in the cipher. What they saw after the surgery is still a mystery. So we don't know what the occultists' hidden truth is, or how true it is. We can only speculate. And my speculation is that there's more to reality than we know. Physicists are learning every day that the laws of physics don't make sense. The smallest bits of material, stuff that atoms are made of, never touch each other. Even atoms don't touch each other, yet they make up solid stuff. 99.99% of every particle is empty space, yet the world is full of stuff. If you look at something from far enough, you can see the past, because what you're seeing is an old reflection. But if you go fast enough, you can travel into the future. There's just so much that is beyond our understanding. And I don't know if the occultists' eyes could see beyond this confusing imagery and see the underlying truth, or if they were just Freemasons who renamed their society to avoid getting persecuted. All I know is that I would love to get my eyes on that Teaching for the Apprentices document. And remember Maria Orsic, Hitler's psychic who I briefly covered in this video? Well, I have an entire video on her, and I highly recommend that you check it out by clicking the thumbnail on the screen.